Good evening, everyone. I am James Kenley. I serve as the Executive Director for the Vail Symposium. On behalf of our Board of Directors, welcome. The Vail Symposium has been offering affordable, thought-provoking programming to the Vail community since 1971, usually here in Vail, but now also in your living rooms. We are a nonprofit organization and ticket sales cover about 10% of our operating revenue. Donors at every level bring our mission to life in our community, and I'd like to thank a few important organizations and individuals now. Our presenting sponsors are discovervail.com, that's the town of Vail, and the Frechette Family Foundation. Our event sponsors are Vail Resorts Epic Promise, the Vail Daily, and the Antlers at Vail. The summer season is generously underwritten by Cindy Ingalls, and our virtual programs are sponsored by Alpine Bank. Tonight's program was developed in partnership with our good friends at Bravo Vail. I'll pause for your applause. Two items to be aware of before we get started. This program will run until 7 p.m. Mountain Time, and it is being recorded. Please tell your friends who aren't online tonight to check it out starting tomorrow. Also, please submit your questions tonight using the Q&A feature. You can submit those at any time, and our panel will address them later in the program. This is our third program of the summer season, and I won't mention all 22 programs right now, but I do want to highlight a few coming up in June. Next week, the Conversations on Controversial Issues, moderated by Clay Jenkinson series, returns with a panel discussion on an issue that feels ever present in American life: gun violence. The motivation of this series is not to persuade, but rather to deepen our collective understanding and inspire more civil discourse in our communities. The next night, Clay will present a primer program called Native Americans: Essential Understanding. Eagle Flight Days and the Eagle Valley Land Trust are presenting events featuring Indigenous peoples next weekend, and we will have two more programs in August on the theme as well. This is an important conversation in our community, and we hope you'll join all of the organizations working to advance our understanding of it this summer. Rounding out the month of June is a program called Leaders at All Levels with former Cordillera resident Chuck Walkendorfer and Vail's own John Horan Cates. Chuck's new book called Don't Wait for Someone Else to Fix It has been featured in Forbes and Inc. magazines and uses profiles from around the world to inspire each of us to embrace our potential as leaders at home, at work, and in our communities. Please visit vailsymposium.org for the full schedule, as well as recordings of previous programs, the sign up for our mailing list, and of course, our donation page. Tonight, whether you are here in the Valley or packing up to come here next week, we're all excited for another wonderful summer here in Vail. Perhaps the chief elicitor of wonder is the Bravo Vail Music Festival. Over the next hour, we'll hear from Executive Director Caitlin Murray and Artistic Director Anne-Marie McDermott in conversation with Vail Symposium's Greg Dobbs. For more than 35 years, Bravo Vail has enriched the community through the power of music from the world's finest orchestras. This season's program features the New York Philharmonic, the Dallas Symphony Orchestra, the Philadelphia Orchestra, and the Academy of St. Martin in the Fields with legendary soloists. The conversation tonight isn't a sales pitch for the summer's programs. We're assuming we all already have our tickets, right? But rather, it's an opportunity to peek behind the curtain and learn about how this world-class festival is made, and perhaps hear some funny stories from previous years as well. To be our lens into a rich and fun subject tonight is a seasoned journalist and a friend of the symposium, Greg Dobbs. Greg is the winner of 3 Emmy Awards and has covered conflict and culture around the world and here at home. You can follow his reporting on hot topics on Substack, and tonight he's representing all of us as an avid fan of Bravo's incredible productions. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome Anne-Marie and Caitlin to the virtual Vail Symposium and to invite Greg Dobbs to get us started.
James, thank you, and I'll talk about culture, not conflict tonight. Some of you might remember the radio commentator Paul Harvey, who had a wildly popular feature called The Rest of the Story, where he told the story behind the story. So as James said, that's what we're going to do tonight with Bravo, because for most of us, whether it's community concerts or family concerts, children's concerts, lectures about the music we're going to hear, let alone the major orchestral concerts in the amphitheater, what do? We buy our tickets, we get to the theater, we go buy some food and drink, maybe more like drink and food. We take our seats, sometimes with the help of a volunteer usher. We bask in the beauty of the music, we applaud the musicians, and we go home. It all seems seamless, but that's part of the magic. It's not part of the planning for every concert for the Bravo season. As you're going to find out, the planning, the logistics, the coordination can be a year-long, even sometimes a years-long project. So my first question to Anne Marie or to Caitlin is, since it all looks so smooth to those of us sitting in our seats or out on the lawn, what are we missing?
Greg, it is such a great question. And I just have to say, what a complete pleasure to be here this evening talking about one of our favorite subjects, Bravo. I always think back to my first summer, 2011, when I was an audience member and for the first time, and you sit in that audience, we have maybe the world's greatest audience in Vail, truly. And you see the musicians walk out on stage, or you see the soloists or some of the great conductors that we have. And that moment in time, which is so magical and exhilarating, that's probably years in the making. We have an overarching philosophy, I guess, it's probably not too strong a word for it at Bravo in putting our seasons together. And those qualities, I really would say, are joy, are passion, commitment, artistic excellence, and a very deep gratitude for the community that we exist in, because we couldn't exist without the Vail Valley community. So there we have stories we could tell you, but I can tell you, one of the soloists we have coming this summer has been someone on my list artistically to invite as a soloist since 2011. And we finally have him coming this summer. But I'm going to leave that as a cliffhanger. I'm not going to tell you who.
There's the years-long process right there. Let's talk about getting them here. I mean, you move 4 major orchestras, 1 from London, 3 from cities around the country. What does that take to move them? And then once they're here, to house them, to feed them, to get them around town, to entertain them when they're not entertaining us?
I think you're hitting on such an important part of the Bravo Vail Festival, Greg. And I think anybody who either attends Bravo Vail or is even just in Vail during the summer can feel that energy and that sense that there is a festival going on. There's musicians walking through the village with violins on their backs. You see them riding their bikes and really kind of engaging and participating in all that life in the Vail Valley is. Playing tennis. Their rehearsal is very close to tennis courts, so many of them take advantage of that. All of that to say, Vail becomes a second home for them. And it goes everything from flying them here from whatever their home city may be, ground transportation from Denver or from Eagle, everything that traveling I-70 in the summertime entails. And we all know that that can be really difficult. The Philadelphia Orchestra 2 years ago was not able to land in Denver, wound up getting pushed back to the middle of nowhere in Kansas, delayed because of storms, and didn't wind up landing until about 2 o'clock in the morning. Had to get up, go to rehearsal at 10 o'clock the next morning and play their first concert that evening. So there's all these, all the little travel snags that any one of us might encounter in our personal life, times 120 musicians and the administration for an orchestra with a very rigid schedule that they're faced with.
So with that rigid schedule, does that mean you have to lay out a timeline for their days? They've got the rehearsals, they've got the performances, maybe meetings. How does that work?
Absolutely. And I'll let Anne-Marie speak a little more to this, but what I will say is it is maybe the most precise timeline that you could imagine. We actually have a software program. It's called Arts Vision. And on a weekly basis during the festival, our staff gets together and we review the upcoming week, day by day, event by event, hour by hour, minute by minute. Truly making sure we have every piece of the logistics in place, that nothing is missing, that we haven't doubled up somewhere, that we know who's driving the soloist to the dinner after the concert, who's taking, if the conductor is bringing his wife and daughter who's transporting them, where are their seats. It's every piece of logistics that you can imagine, so that it is the well-oiled machine that we hope and think it comes across as, but it takes that level of detail and care for the minutia. And
So
Anne-Marie, I was just going to ask Anne-Marie, when you mentioned a rehearsal schedule, there's a stopwatch on stage because orchestras are union organizations. And I mean, if we go 1 minute over, we're in overtime. And Anne-Marie, you could speak to that a little better than I can, just the precision that's necessary.
Oh, absolutely. We do the rehearsal schedule because we're not only dealing with these huge orchestras all season long. We're dealing with our chamber music series, our piano fellows who play a lot of concerts, our classically uncorked series, our immersive series, our soiree series. So you can begin to just envision what the master rehearsal schedule looks like. And I can promise you, it does not take one meeting to come up with this rehearsal schedule. It's like you have to go over it and go over it and go over it so that it's as precise. Because as Caitlin said, there's a great expression I always love as a musician: the greater your discipline, the greater your freedom. And I think that applies here, that we're highly, highly disciplined about what we do and all the plans, so that when something doesn't go wrong, we can deal with it. But another really overarching thing that we really do think about, because you mentioned this, Greg, is not only the rehearsals and the concerts, but the musicians themselves, and whether they're playing tennis or playing golf or hanging out and at a dinner party or at a restaurant. Something that we put a very high priority on, is really letting all the musicians, hundreds of musicians every summer, really letting them feel Bravo's love for them. And our audience does the same thing, as we've all experienced, right? It is to be up on that stage and feel that audience kind of scream and stand up. There's nothing like it. And I think, that's really important to us, because we want these musicians to feel like they're coming back home every summer.
Yeah.
What special things do you do for them to let them feel that love from Bravo, besides the performances themselves?
I always joke that next to the music, obviously the music is the most important thing at Bravo Vail. Food and wine are right, very close second and third. There is a lot of just wonderful socializing and visiting and wining and dining. There's just an incredible feeling after a concert with this group of people who just created this thing that the rest of us got to experience, that was here for a moment. We experienced and is gone now. And there's this energy. I'm sure there's adrenaline and camaraderie amongst the musicians, but we really try and make sure that they can embrace that and celebrate that. There's a lot of golfing. There's a lot of tennis. Anne-Marie, do you remember? I think it was the first year that the Academy of St. Martin in the Fields came to visit us, and they have an off day in their schedules. They had a concert, rehearsal, but they had a full day off before they had 2 more concerts. And we learned after the fact that they had all together gone whitewater rafting together.
Yeah.
And we said, no, not until after the concerts are over. So we really try and make available to them anything that Vail has to offer. And so many of them, they bring their families, they bring the grandparents, the kids, and they make it's a working vacation, but they make it a family vacation.
I listen to Joshua Bell every season and think he must spend every waking hour playing his violin, but that's not realistic. What does he do with his free time, if you know?
Well, he has children himself, and he's involved in so many different areas. As the music director of the Academy of St. Martin in the Fields, there is, an artistic administrative side of that role of coming up with programs and all of that work. But he has an extraordinarily varied career, so I think he is a very disciplined person, because he would have to be to kind of manage all the balls in the air with his career all the time. And it's a joy for us to have him coming to Bravo in the summers that he can.
I figure you must run something in the neighborhood of 400 artists, 400 musicians through Vail in the course of a relatively short season, you must come up against some prima donnas.
Yes, of course, of course. But you know what? Being a performer myself, I don't like to even view it that way as someone being a prima donna. I think we all have a very individual psychology as performers of walking out on stage. I think sometimes, we're human. So some days you're in the best mood to be walking out on stage playing a concert, and sometimes you're not. Sometimes someone's feeling the altitude, or they had a really hard travel journey getting to Vail, or any number of things. And there have been many instances where, we're trying to just embrace someone with, okay, what can we do to help you? Can we give you oxygen backstage? That's a real thing, where we always have oxygen backstage. I can think of a few performers where they weren't feeling great. Maybe they didn't realize that actually a couple hits of oxygen can really solve the problem. So, and we try, we always get together, Caitlin and I, the second the orchestra's on stage, for their very first rehearsal every summer. Caitlin and I make a point of going and talking to the orchestra, of personally welcoming them, and then just giving them some tips about being in the altitude.
Yeah.
Hydrate, and get good rest. Make sure you eat. Just a variety of things to kind of help them.
And I think I'll add to that too, Anne-Marie. Greg, what you touch on is interesting because, of course, everybody has their good days and bad days. And there's musicians in any genre of music who maybe have more of a reputation for being a little more high maintenance than others. We don't tend to have too many of those experiences. And I think that there's a very real reason for that. Anne-Marie's role as artistic director is really the overview, right, of putting each season together. And so much of that is done via relationships. These are individuals that she has worked with or not, that she has respect for as musicians, that respect her as musicians. These are premier orchestras amongst the greatest in the entire world. So there, I believe, even for some of the biggest names, most well-known at the peak of their career, these soloists that are coming here, they're happy to be here. And who wouldn't be? Vail in the summertime, right? But there really is that sense. And I don't think it's too kind of lofty to say that it is a bucket list place for a lot of musicians to be able to come and be a part of. And I think that shows through in kind of their behavior, their treatment of us, our treatment of them, and then the music that comes out of it all.
Caitlin, that's such great points that you make. And I can't tell you how many artists, after the first time they played at Bravo, then they'll come up to me or to Caitlin and I after the concert and say, I'd love to come back.
When can I come back?
I mean, honest to God, I think I haven't experienced one artist who, when they left, they were in any way less than thrilled at being there. And I
think that's kind of passing the IQ test.
This is a good point.
Talk a little, please, about the logistics of, let's say, housing them and feeding them. I have to assume that the New York Phil is the single biggest body of musicians you bring to Vail, they and their staff. So they're not all staying, are they, in the same apartment complex or the same hotel or anything like that? How does that work? And
yeah. It changes orchestra by orchestra. And you're correct. Philadelphia Dallas, Philadelphia, and New York are all about the same size. And given any program in any year could kind of expand or contract. But they're spread amongst different hotels based on seniority amongst orchestra members. There are different requirements for condos, multi-bedroom condos. It is an incredible jigsaw puzzle that our director of artistic operations puts together. I'll tell you, in the last 20, 15, 10, even 5 years, it's become a much more significant challenge for us as an organization. We all know the secret is out, right? Vail is the place to be in the summertime. And Bravo Vail is actually one of the community's largest economic drivers. We bring in $29 million of economic impact to the Vail Valley in those 6 weeks. But with that, we're now competing with the audience members who are booking hotel rooms to stay here as well. But these musicians have to stay somewhere. And particularly for the orchestras, they have to stay in the town of Vail. We can't be busing them from Avon. So it's really difficult. It's a significant expense. to whatever degree possible. It's done years in advance. There's a million and one, 11th hour escape stories on that as well, where hotel construction ran longer. And, the New York Phil is going to be here in 2 weeks, and we have 20 rooms fewer than we thought we did. And our colleague Ellie has to scramble and magically pulls rabbits out of hats every time. But housing is one of our single largest expenses as an organization. And it's, as you can imagine, if you're working, you're going to be on stage performing every night. Maybe you've brought your family and you're setting up shop and calling this place home for a week. You need some basic amenities. You need to be comfortable. And we're committed to providing that. But in some cases, it can become a little bit difficult because, look, a number of these orchestras, they've come to Vail longer than either Anne-Marie or I have been associated with Bravo Vail, right? This will be 20 years with the New York Phil. So in their memories, they remember Vail as, it shouldn't be that hard to get a hotel room at the Four Seasons over, 4th of July. It's a very different story now, as we all know. So there's a ton of logistics that go into it.
Anne-Marie, the music, I've never known. Most people probably don't know. Does the orchestra present you with the program? Do you present the orchestra with at least requests for music? How does that work?
All right. So I'm glad you asked that. It's one of my passions. So, just a couple of overarching things that Jacqueline Taylor, who's on this call too, she and I work very closely together. Jacqueline is the director of artistic planning. And so we look for a variety of programs. We look at the architecture of the entire season, not just one orchestra. We look at the conglomerate of everything that's going to go on in a season. We look at the balance of bringing in new soloists who haven't been there before, bringing back beloved artists. We look at a combination of serious, more profound music and balancing that with some light music. We do some pops programs. We look at different kinds of ensembles. So it's not just string quartets or piano trios, again, with the goal of having a great variety. The wealth of repertoire that's available to us as classical musicians is so inspiring. I always joke that I'll be on my deathbed and have a long list of repertoire I still want to learn. So with the orchestras, it's a collaboration and happening over multiple years. We don't like to repeat Tchaikovsky 6 every other year kind of thing. So the orchestras they request certain kind of staples in the repertoire that they want. Say, we're already very far along in our programming for summer of 2024, and we're actually even already looking into 2025 repertoire wise. And so it's a complicated puzzle, but it's a collaboration. We have really amazing relationships with all of our orchestras, and it's a lot of conversations. We always have like a big powwow meeting with each of the orchestras during the summer so that we can be face to face and talk about all sorts of ideas, and amazing programs have come out of those conversations. So it's just, and we do the same thing with the chamber music ensembles we bring and with the piano fellows we bring. We're on a lot of Zooms, but talking through, really making it a collaborative process with all of the programs.
Are any of the Zooms half as fun as this?
Honestly, we have a ridiculous amount of fun. Okay. We really do. And I always joke, we truly do, right? And I always joke that like rehearsals with musicians are, maybe 70% serious and 30% where you're acting like 5-year-olds. And I think it's important for a release. We all know that, just to all be silly and have fun along the way. It matters.
And Greg, I think you'll appreciate this. I'm gonna ask Anne-Marie to share an anecdote about this. She just explains there's a very real level of strategy and looking at historical information and programming history and the balance of the season when she and Jacqueline are putting the season together with their orchestral partners. But sometimes you have to be opportunistic as well. And great ideas come up and we're able to jump on them. Annie, can you share, I think hopefully many people who are joining us tonight were able to experience Tosca in 2019 when we presented an opera with the Philadelphia Orchestra. And the story of how that came to be is just kind of classic, I feel like. Annie,
Oh,
can you
yes.
share just how that came to be?
Oh, no, thank you, Caitlin. That's an incredible story. Like I said, we always have these sit-down meetings, very often at the amphitheater over in Borgen Plaza. And where we, with the conductor, with the artistic administrators of the orchestra, very, very often with the executive director, president of the orchestra as well, and just throw all sorts of ideas. I mean, the greatest ideas, just throw everything out on the table and see what sticks. So we were having an amazing meeting with Yannick Nezes, again, the music director of the Philadelphia Orchestra, and the executive director, talking about ideas. And then Yannick brought up the idea of, well, I would love to do Tosca. And so he and I was, practically fell on the floor, and I said, really, like, let's really talk about this and think about, could Bravo had never presented an opera. I mean, this is gigantic. It's unbelievable to take this on. And so I remember after that meeting, then I was at a reception with Yannick later in the day, and Yannick grabbed my hand at a certain point. He said, come on, we're going to go tell people we're doing Tosca. And very often it's when if the idea is spoken and the music director and me on the artistic director's side, we get really excited. This is the awesome thing about Bravo. We can literally move mountains to make projects happen. And we have, and we did for Tosca. I mean, we were babies in presenting an opera. And I can tell you, at the very first rehearsal in 2019 of Tosca on stage at the Ford Amphitheater, Yannick was like a kid in a candy shop. He was jumping up and down. He said, this is an incredible opera venue. And who knew, right? And so that's just one of many stories about a great idea popping up. And then we all, something that we've now been incorporating more. And I'm so proud of us for this and so excited about it. We've been now incorporating more commissioned works into what we're doing with our programs. And it's really, really, we're the most important classical music festival in the United States, if not the world. When you look at what makes Bravo unique, 4 orchestras, there's no other festival that does that, right? So one of our great privileges is to commission works of living composers, bring the composer out to be with us in Vail and help the audience get to know how this composer thinks about music. It's really fun. It's really creative. And we're adding to the symphonic repertoire for the next 100, 200 years by doing this all under the auspices of Bravo Vail. So that's been a really fun new pursuit for us.
Quick question before we leave opera, by the way. 2 questions. One can be a yes or no answer. Is there more opera in Bravo's future? And number 2, it's got to be much more expensive to stage an opera, is it not?
The answers are yes and yes.
Caitlin.
We have very quiet. I keep joking that it's the worst kept secret at Bravo Vail, but yes, opera is returning to Bravo Vail stage in 2024. We're going to officially announce this with our partners at the Philadelphia Orchestra during their residency.
You are really good at keeping a secret.
I'm so good. Just yeah. You know not to share your deepest darkest secrets with me now. It's incredibly expensive. And that's part of that art form, and I think it's part of with the intricacies of the sets, with singers, with everything that goes into a world-class opera production. We are very lucky in Vail, at Bravo Vail, that we have generous supporters. We have such a hardworking team on all aspects that are able to pull this production together, that we have artistic leadership like Anne-Marie McDermott and Yannick Nezes at the Philadelphia Orchestra that have the vision, and that we have a community that funds us and makes it possible that we can accomplish something like that. But given the human and financial resources, it's not an every year endeavor for us. We'll say that.
By the way, one of you has made mention of conductors. Did I read correctly that of the 6 New York Philharmonic concerts this year, there would be 5 different conductors.
You did.
And yes,
And
why is that?
Okay, I will give you a very good reason for that. We've had a relationship with the music director of the New York Philharmonic for many years now, Jaap van Zweden, and because he was the music director of the Dallas Symphony. So he came to us with Dallas for many years, became the music director of New York Philharmonic, and he comes. He is, in recent months, he has been named the music director of the Seoul Philharmonic, a pretty extraordinary orchestra in South Korea. And he was invited literally by the president of South Korea to conduct a concert in July. He was originally going to come to us for 4 concerts. He was invited to conduct a program in Seoul in memory, in honor of the Halloween stampede victims that happened in Seoul, Korea, last October. It was a heartbreaking story. And so he couldn't say no to that. And we couldn't say no to him. That's very important. He does that program. So that was a little bit of late breaking news for us. We felt like we had the programs, and this is what happens very often. We felt like the programs were all done, signed, sealed, delivered. And then he received that invitation. So he reached out to us. And of course, we respect that tremendously. So we're welcoming a Finnish conductor who's really amazing. His name is Hannu Lintu. He'll conduct the second program. Then we have Jaap van Zweden for the next 2 programs, including an absolutely glorious piece of music, Bruckner's 7th Symphony. And then we're doing Harry Potter, a movie with the live orchestral score, and that'll be conducted by Justin Freer. And then we're welcoming back this summer to the Bravo Festival, the really extraordinary Marin Alsop, really the most trailblazing of female conductors, and it's an honor to have her back with us. So it'll be an exciting residency, no doubt.
And a Colorado product, by the way.
That's
Marinol.
right. That's right.
Yeah.
She is.
You talked about the change having to be in Seoul. You've had a lot of curveballs, no doubt, thrown at you. Talk about a few things that might have actually made you wonder, are we going to pull it together by concert time?
Well, I'd love to bring up one, and then I'm sure Caitlin has a million of them on her brain. But one that was profoundly meaningful to us was summer of 2020. And, we struggled like everybody on the planet. Are we going to be able to have a festival? Well, it became very clear by late April, there's no way. But I will never, ever forget the experience of endless hours on the phone with Caitlin and the 2 of us, sometimes crying, sometimes like desperately trying to bring music to Vail that summer. Because look at our location in Vail and at the Ford Amphitheater. We're outdoors. And so we wouldn't and couldn't let go of this idea. And as risky as everything was in that summer, we felt we owe it to this unbelievable community to bring music. And my God, did we all need some live music at that moment in time. So we figured out a way. We had created, our former technical director, Todd Howe, figured out a way of building for us. It's like a little mini stage on wheels. And we call it the Bravo Vail Music Box. And it's a tiny little stage that can be towed from location to location. I think, Caitlin, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we did 61 music box concerts or
49.
I'm sorry.
We had
49.
other concerts that summer, as we did have a few others. So you're
okay. Got it. 49. But like a couple of times we went to somebody who lived way up in Cordillera, and we just pulled into their driveway and played a concert. There was a couple of times there were 2 people listening. A couple of times there were maybe 8 people. And then we also were able to present chamber music concerts at the Ford Amphitheater, which is approximately a 3,000 seat venue. And we were able to have 175 people spaced out. And we had 13 musicians come out and spend the month with us. And it was almost an out-of-body experience playing those concerts, I can tell you, and for our audience. So for me, that story was kind of life-changing and just made me so deeply grateful for Bravo and for the community we have. But there were some funny ones too.
And before we get to your favorite curveball, overcome, Caitlin, what are the policies on weather, and when has weather been great
Well,
success of a concert?
My stories were all going to be involving weather, so it's a great question. Our policies have evolved over time, but at the Ford Amphitheater, it's a rain or shine concert, and I always find it really inspiring on one of those rainy or cold evenings to look out at the lawn and see the way people come prepared. I mean, we tried to clear the lawn, evacuate the lawn one night last year, and people wouldn't leave. I mean, they are socked in and have their camping gear and they're ready to go. So I think that we have a very dedicated audience. We have safety procedures and policies. We've actually worked with a professional in risk assessment to make sure that we are maintaining safe policies for musicians and audience alike. But we've all seen it at the amphitheater or in Vail. A few years ago, it was snowing on June 23rd, and we wound up, 7:30 in the morning having a powwow in the dining room at the Sun and Alp with Anne-Sophie Mutter, members of the Chamber Orchestra of Vienna, Berlin, because we were trying to convince them to still go on stage. We went through every scenario. Okay, based on our ticket sales, can we move this indoors to the Valar and have 2 concerts that day so everybody who bought a ticket can go? Is there a way we can turn Dobson around fast enough so that we can get them in there, because we couldn't get them to be outdoors? Ultimately, it was definitely a ask forgiveness moment on our part. We built a tent on stage like you would see at a wedding or a party that was on stage at the Ford Amphitheater. The whole orchestra was huddled underneath it. We had heating ducts pouring into it, and Sophie Mutter could control the temperature. She would tuck the violin kind of under her sweater when she wasn't playing. Our technical director was taking pictures of musicians' instruments with an infrared camera to show them that their instruments were staying at a consistent temperature throughout, so that they would feel comfortable going on stage. We had an intern that we sent, I think, to the sporting goods store in Silverthorne at the time to just buy them out of hand warmers and emergency blankets, and we were handing those out to musicians and audience members. So I would say adaptability to the weather is certainly a big piece. The reverse has been true. A few years ago, when there was the major wildfire down in Basalt, we were not in any risk in the Vail Valley, but the wind turned and the New York Philharmonic was here, and it was raining ash, and the air quality was getting fairly poor. And we had to get together and figure out a way to monitor air quality and report that back to them and make sure that they felt comfortable and understood that, we were showing them on a map where we are and where the fire is. So it's a matter weather and understanding the weather have become much bigger priorities. Our team subscribes to a number of different weather services, including an on-call meteorologist that can help us in a minute-by-minute situation to say, all right, you've got to call the concert and put it in a severe weather delay. Or no, there's a storm in the area, but it's going to kind of turn off to the south and you guys will be fine.
It's great. Caitlin, I just want to add one other very, very short, funny story, because just talking about animals. And this was hilarious. We were doing, I think it was the same summer, but 2019, late June, Dallas Symphony Orchestra, Beethoven Triple Concerto on stage, right? One of the most exhilarating pieces of music during the opening tutti. I was playing with 2 incredible colleagues, and we kind of heard some kind of scuffle on stage. Okay, we didn't know what happened. After we finished, we found out there was a raccoon on the roof who had loosened a screw, not that small. The screw fell on the head. It was not small. Fell on the head of one of the first violin players in the Dallas Symphony. She remarkably didn't flip out. She took the screw, put it on her music stand, and the next day, Ellie Munro had to arrange for the town to come and deal with the family of raccoons who were living on the roof of the amphitheater.
What instrument was the raccoon playing at the time?
Bassoon. Don't you think a raccoon would play the bassoon?
It makes sense. There must be a point, as a matter of fact, just before we wrap up the issue of weather, when the level of moisture, perhaps the low temperature, certain instruments, maybe more than others, cannot deliver.
Well, they find a way. Honestly, it's not so much a matter of the instruments; it's more a matter of the players. And if it gets too hot, that becomes very difficult to play because you're slipping and sliding. if it gets too cold. That can be hard to get the dexterity and move your fingers. But I'm telling you, when we had Chamber Orchestra Vienna Berlin on stage, they all had their pockets just stuffed with hand warmers. They were wearing long underwear, whatever it took to the show must go on.
Yeah, it was impressive to see really the fortitude that they displayed in those weather conditions. I mean, we were up there making stage announcements in our winter coats. And they had to go out and make their fingers go like this. And it's really incredible. And you'll see it on a smaller scale, maybe sometimes weather related, maybe not. But I want to say it was with Philadelphia last year, and the soloist, it was a violinist playing, and she popped the string like mid solo. Concertmaster hands her his violin, associate concertmaster. They literally passed violins down the section so that they could keep the piece going. So there's just, it's this level of adaptability. And like Anne-Marie said, the show must go on. And I think the musicians are really committed to making that happen. They don't want to cancel it. They want to make it work. And we find a way.
Somebody told me something really strange to me about the musicians with the New York Philharmonic, which is that I don't even know what this means, but that they tune their instruments to a different A than others do.
This is good point, Greg. I'm glad you brought that up.
Well, what's up with that?
Well, all three orchestras tune to a different A. So the biggest challenge with that is for our piano technician, because we generally have a piano soloist with each of the orchestras, and the piano technician has to tune the piano to whether it's A441 or A440 or A442, because if the principal oboe of Philadelphia Orchestra is not happy with the A, we're going to know about it, and it has to match up with the piano. So
I've never asked this question before. I'm a journalist who's interviewed 1,000 people. Aren't all A's alike?
They're not. They're not. The higher the A is tuned to, the more the brighter the sound is. So
this is a great point, Anne-Marie. If you were to come to every single Bravo Vail concert of the season and be blindfolded and not know what orchestra is on stage, you over time, even a casual attendee, a casual listener, you would be able to discern that there is a difference, that the orchestras have a different sound, a different personality to them, right? I mean, you see this.
Oh, my first summer in 2011, I was flabbergasted by how different the personality and the sound of Dallas, Philly, and New York. It's very clear, and I'm sure a lot of you on this symposium this evening have experienced that of, how can these orchestras, they all share a lot of the same great masterpieces of the repertoire, but they sound very different. And people always talk about the Philadelphia Orchestra and the Philadelphia Orchestra string sound. The New York Philharmonic, of which my sister is a member for many years, so I get to see my sister every summer in Vail. They're maybe the most feisty of the orchestras, maybe like the loudest, you could say. Their brass is very powerful. I would say the Dallas Symphony is, again, they're all, what is that great expression? A parent doesn't have a favorite child, right? So we at Bravo, we don't have a favorite child. We truly don't. They're all so unique and present themselves in such a unique way.
And are those unique features, do those come from the artistic director of each orchestra? One likes a loud orchestra, one likes a feisty orchestra, and so forth.
You know what? It's a collaboration. Truly, I don't think the music director doesn't really dictate. The music director certainly has aesthetic standards that they're looking for within an orchestra. But as an example, the story with Philadelphia Orchestra is apparently that they used to play at the Academy of Music in Philadelphia, which was apparently, I never attended a concert there. It was a pretty dead space. So the string players had to work harder to achieve a very well blended, unified sound. So they had to use more bow to get this gorgeous, silky sound that they get. And the story is that they have just, that became part of their aesthetic, is this sound. And that was because of a venue issue. So it's Of course, with different conductors on the podium, you do hear a different sound out of the orchestra. But I also think these three, and listen, we have a long list of orchestras who are dying to come to us. We just, we need more time. But these orchestras, they all do have a very distinct personality. It's really interesting. Everybody should pay attention to it this summer and see what your opinion is when you hear these different orchestras. It's very fun.
I'm going to. We have a question from a member of the audience, Caitlin, this is probably for you, who says, you've already referred to that night when there was a tornado, a fire, a flood, and a hurricane, and some people wouldn't leave the lawn. The question is, we love sitting on the lawn. Has the, quote, lawn culture always been like it is now?
Oh, that's such a great question. I can't necessarily speak to whether it's always been like that or not, but I can tell you this will be my 13th season at Bravo Vail, and I think it's only gotten kind of more and more robust. I make it a point every year. I sit on the lawn for a number of concerts. I'm very careful to make sure I'm not stealing somebody's spot, because there are people, that's their spot and they're there every night. I think there is this kind of neighborhood feel. You'll see little kids running around. There's always a few little kids conducting, which I love. At the pop shows, people will be on their feet dancing. Sometimes you can see a younger couple on a date. Sometimes you see somebody lounging back doing a crossword puzzle. And to me, it's kind of the epitome of world-class music colliding with like the Vail culture. I think it's such an accessible way for people to get introduced to classical music. It's not stuffy. It's comfortable. Anybody can go. We have people who clearly just rode their bike up Vail Pass and down, and the bike is chained to the fence of the amphitheater, and they're sitting on the lawn. So there is this feeling of the culture of the lawn, and gosh, I think it's probably evolved. I hope it always stays that way, and you'll see me out there trying to navigate it in my high heels more than once this summer for sure.
Another question from the audience. Can you help us understand the impact of the conductors? What characteristics make them great rather than just good? What can we look for and listen for? And I'm going to add this caveat. I was on the board for years of something called the National Repertory Orchestra that plays in Breckenridge. Yes. And the musical director for a long time, a fellow named Carl Topolo, I once asked him, what happens? Sometimes he would just stop conducting. He would stop waving his wand, and the orchestra played on. And he said to me, if they can't play that tune without me by the time we get before an audience, they shouldn't be in the orchestra. So that said, what's the answer to that question? What's the impact of the conductor? What makes a great conductor different than a good conductor?
Okay, I'll answer that. But first, let me start by saying one of my motivations in wanting to add a chamber orchestra to the Bravo season is that these chamber orchestras don't work with a conductor. And it's fascinating for an audience, for me, for all of us, to witness the group of musicians on stage and how that changes when there isn't a conductor on the podium. Of course, these are smaller groups of musicians. Wow, this is a profound question. I think the great conductors, of which we have some of the greatest conductors in the world coming to us every summer, truly. And they have a vision for and an architecture for a great symphonic work. They understand the storytelling of a great symphonic work. So we are the beneficiaries when we're sitting in the audience of being kind of guided from the very first note through the last note of a great symphony in a way that tells a story to us. I always say, I never want to dictate what an audience member is feeling, but all I want is that they're feeling, is that an audience member is open and has their ears open and forms their own opinion, because music is a subjective art form, right? Every conductor feels differently about every great symphonic work, as does every chamber music artist or every soloist. I think it's also their relationship and how they've built the relationship with the musicians of the orchestra. And with the great maestros, there's a level of trust that you can, it's palpable. You can feel it. You can feel the musicians are glued to the conductor on the podium and every wish and desire that he has. The great conductors also do realize, as Maestro Carl Topolo said, that they don't need to conduct every millisecond when they're on the podium. They need to trust the orchestra, the musicians of the orchestra, as well as the musicians trusting them. And it's that level of trust that's not only with great symphonic works, that's exists in great chamber music ensembles as well. This level of trust so that the performance is greater than the sum of its parts, the sum of the 110 musicians on stage with a great conductor on the podium. The performance then transcends that because everybody is so deeply immersed in what they're doing.
So the hallmark of a great conductor, if I hear you correctly, is not just leading great music, but connecting with great musicians in the orchestra, connecting with them.
That's
personally,
beautifully put, Greg. Absolutely. Beautifully worded. Yep. And of course, having the relationship with the audience, because we can get up and play in a black box all day long. But when you're on stage, you need to, and these poor conductors, they have their back to the audience, but of understanding also how to be connecting with the audiences and drawing the audiences into what they're so passionate about.
This is a rhetorical question. And I know the answer in part because I'm a part-time volunteer for Bravo. But that said, you talked earlier, one of you did, about all the volunteers who help usher the spouses around of the musicians and see to their comfort and see to their transport. Talk about the volunteer element, how important it is to you. I'm not promoting the volunteer element, but could you do it without a large legion of volunteers?
No. So I'll make the disclaimer. I'm not promoting it either. However, we could not. I mean, I'm assuming most people on this symposium call have experienced a Bravo Vail concert. Volunteers are scanning your ticket. When you get to the gate, they're handing you a program book. They're telling you where the restroom and the bar and your seat are all at. If you have an issue, if you have an emergency, they're there. The number of volunteer hours combined over the course of the season is incredible. And the value of that is a direct impact on the festival. So our volunteer guild also sells all of the merchandise that we have available at the amphitheater and pays dues. And that's to the tune at the end of the season of upwards of $15,000 a year that they bring in and then donate directly to Bravo Vail's education and engagement programs. So there's so many levels to why volunteerism is important. I think on top of it, something that's a little less tangible is the connection it builds between Bravo Vail and the community, right? Greg, you've been a volunteer for a number of years. It makes you an advocate for the organization. You get kind of like we're doing tonight, you get this peek behind the curtain and really see what goes into it. And you tell your friends and they tell their friends. And I think it really adds to our role in the community, the fact that our community members are out supporting Bravo Vail in this way. It's not just by writing checks, which is, of course, very important for nonprofit organizations, but it's by rolling up people actually taking the time, rolling up their sleeves and helping out. And that's just, you can't function without it.
How about the staff? How large is your payroll, whether it's part-timers or full-timers? And what's the sort of spectrum of responsibilities they have? Some are technical, some are artistic, some are somewhere else.
I like to say we are small but mighty. So everything that you're hearing about, years of planning in advance, booking the world's greatest orchestras, the most sought after soloists. We haven't even really talked about the chamber music side of things, which is, in quantity about half of what we do. There's about 20 of us that make all of that happen. During the festival season, when we add seasonal staff and crew and build up our box office and bring in interns, we'll about double. But full-time year-round, there's about 20 of us. We are located in every time zone in the United States. So there are people who are Zooming at 9 p.m. and 4 a.m. to make it all happen. And we've got a core administration that keeps the office running and keeps the lights on and does our finances and budgeting and all of that good stuff, and is critically important to kind of make sure that everybody else can do their jobs. And it can go from everything you'd expect to very, very technical. We've got fundraisers, we've got marketers, we've got PR, we have technical folks, a technical director who deals with sound and lighting and making sure that the sound is in balance with the way the orchestra and the soloist and the music director want it to be, and that wherever you're sitting in the amphitheater, you can hear it. We have people who are dealing, we've mentioned our colleague Ellie a few times, she's dealing with housing, with getting the orchestra here, with getting the instruments that you might not think of, a gong when we need it, whatever it might be for the instrumentation of a certain piece. You have Anne-Marie and Jacqueline Taylor, who are actually negotiating with soloists, picking the soloists, determining the programs.
So where do you go for a gong? I've always wondered.
That's a great question.
I couldn't tell you, honestly, not to put her on the spot, but if Ellie Monroe is able to come off, I mean, she's sourced more than one unusual instrument. Maybe she could speak to something like that for a moment.
In a very short window of time, Ellie, please.
Yeah, we have a wonderful percussion partner down in Denver Percussion, and they source a lot of our more unusual percussion instruments. But we have been tasked with sourcing all sorts of interesting instruments over the years, including a harmonium and all sorts of gongs and percussion, and it's a really fun challenge.
Great. One of the members of the audience has asked, and this will have to be the last question, about the vision, about the future. I mean, you've talked about the vision you once had to bring in new composers with new compositions. You commission them. It has happened. You talked about the vision for bringing in Tosca and opera. It has happened, and it's going to happen again. Is there anything else on the radar?
Always. When you think about the body of extraordinary soloists and chamber music artists that exist on this planet, we've gotten more and more global in our reach with a lot of the soloists that we deal with, because as the festival has grown up, so to speak, word spreads, amongst the musical community, not only in this country, but in Europe and in Asia as well. And so we still have a long list of soloists who we're working to get to come to the festival. And, we're thrilled with all our orchestras. We have quite a few orchestras who have approached us who would like to come. So there's always more, a lot more dreams that we have for Bravo, because again, it's a gift to have Bravo, to have this community. And so I can't even, it would take me a couple hours to tell you all of the dreams of things that could happen at Bravo as we move forward.
And I'll say, in addition to programmatically, we've been in a process building our long range vision and our next strategic plan. And one of the major focuses that we have moving forward, and it's been a focus for Bravo Vail for a long time, but is that increased accessibility, is looking at what we can provide throughout the rest of the year in the schools to our local community. Over half of what Bravo does each year is actually free of charge. And it's really important to us to continue to focus on that, to try and make sure that music education is accessible to all the kids in the public school system here. And I think that's somewhere that you'll continue to see growth and evolution in the years to come.
Okay, 30-second answer, no more from each of you, please. And of course, I'm in a union, so I won't be on this stage after the end of the hour. Start with Caitlin and then Anne-Marie. Caitlin, you're the executive director. Anne-Marie, you're the artistic director. But if somebody watched what you do, saw the broad range of what you accomplish, what would they call you? What would they say your title ought to be?
Oh, I mean, either circus master or janitor, and everything in between. I think I always joke that my job is I was handed something great and I'm supposed to not break it. So I try and keep things running.
It's good description. Anne-Marie. I
would say, hopefully, music truly impacts people's lives in small, big, huge ways. And, that's the most important goal, is bringing people together through the power of music and through how enriching it is. And you think about every night at the amphitheater, the social element of thousands of people who all just love the music as much as we love the music. And so I don't know what you'd call that, but hopefully a purveyor of some good in the world. Right.
Somehow you guys and your staff of roughly 20 take all these complexities and make it seem simple. Thank you to both of you. And now thank you to the audience. Back to James Kendley, the executive director of Vail Symposium.
Thanks, Greg. And Caitlin and Anne-Marie, I'm goosebumps. I cannot wait for this summer. It has been so fun to get to work with you, to collaborate with you, to highlight Bravo Vail. I can't believe I get to do this for my job. Aren't we so lucky to contribute to the cultural fabric of such an incredible community? Thank you for spending what is very valuable time as you're preparing for this summer season with us, with the Vail Symposium community. Greg, thank you for being our eyes and ears as a fan and volunteer with Bravo. And thanks to all of you who joined us this evening. And for those of you who are watching this on recording, I'll encourage you to visit bravovail.org. Summer Festival kicks off on June 22nd, next Thursday evening. And with that, we'll bid you all a wonderful evening and a fun and safe summer here in Vail. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.